Tor, the very best in science fiction and fantasy.
In the room for this massively exciting triple feature podcast, we have me, John Scalzi. We have him, Scott Westerfeld.
Hello.
And we have her, Justine Larbalestier.
That's not actually the correct pronunciation.
What is it?
We'll let it go.
That's the way I always say it. Well, actually, when I talk about the both of you together, because the fact that you're both married, I usually...
To each other.
To each other, even. I usually just shorten it to the Larbalestifelds.
No, our preferred ones are Westerfeld or Larbalestier.
Larbfeld?
Larbalestier. We like Larbalestier. It sounds cranky and Germanic.
And it's the name of our Wi-Fi site at home.
Oh, is that right?
Until you blew it up, and then we had to call it Westerfeld.
I know. I made a mistake of some kind.
How did you blow up your Wi-Fi?
There was a version control incident. That's version.
Yeah. And zombies.
Yes, there were zombies involved.
When in doubt, there are always zombies. Right now, we are at a hotel in Schaumburg, Illinois, for the Great Lakes Booksellers Association. And one of the things that we were talking about is how the structure of the hotel itself is uniquely situated or uniquely designed for zombie suppression.
Well, zombie resistance is more like it. The problem, though, is there's too much glass in the building. I think once you got a big horde of zombies, they'd be pressing against it, knocking their way in, and they would pretty much control the lobby. But there's a lot of places to shoot down on the zombies from the sort of around the atrium.
Right.
It's one of those places with a big open area, and all the rooms. You step out, you cock your shotgun, you lean over the rail, and it's just zombie lobby mayhem.
Yeah. Well, the problem is regardless of whatever structural materials that you have, your lobby's going to be a mess no matter what.
And the lobby is actually where the food is, so I don't think we'd last very long, really.
And there's nothing in the refrigerators.
That is true.
The tiny refrigerators come completely empty. Therefore, there's no Toblerone survival kit.
Right, exactly. The honor bar is not very full of honor at the moment. we would be in deep trouble.
Yeah, the Voss water would not last.
The Voss water would not. But you can use the tap water. They did that thing where they did a taste test. What was it? Penn and Teller did the taste test where they gave people expensive water, and they gave them New York tap water.
New York tap water is the best.
Yeah, and then they were like, which tastes better? And they were like, and everybody picked the tap water, and the expensive water was like $4 a bottle, and the tap water is like pennies.
Scalzi, are we here to sell tap water, or are we here to sell books?
Fine. Let's go ahead and go straight ahead to the books. Well, and let's start with you, Scott, because you have a book that's coming out right darn soon.
It's coming out on Tuesday, which is October 2nd, possibly in the past as you hear this, moments before. It's called Extras. It's the fourth book in the Uglies trilogy, and it's set in a different city than the one that Tally and Shay and the other people in Uglies grew up in. It's a city in Japan, and it's set about 5 years after the Uglies series is over. Mm-hmm. So Uglies Pretty Specials have already happened. It's 5 years later.
And if you haven't read those, you should put your fingers in your ears for the next bit because it's slightly spoilerish.
It's a little bit spoilery. Well, let's just say that in the trilogy, the Uglies trilogy, the world gets changed by Tally and her pals. So things are different. The regime is ending, and the cities are trying to rebuild themselves around a new system. And the city that Aya lives in, she's a 15-year-old Japanese girl. She's basically about the same age that Tally was at the beginning of the Uglies series.
Right.
And in her city, fame is all important. Everyone walks around and they know exactly how famous they are at any moment. Like you'd be in New York City, or let's say, and you'd say, I'm the 4,358,628th most famous person in New York right now.
So a little bit like, stabbing the dark. There's something comparative Amazon rankings?
Yeah, a little bit. When authors sort of check their Amazon rankings,
Not that we do that.
Never.
Like 6 or 7 times a day. And you know exactly how well you don't really know how well your books are selling.
But you know how well it's selling relative to everybody else in the city that's known as Amazon.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazonia.
So she starts off like Tally at the beginning of Uglies. She's a bit disgruntled and disconnected, and she's not very famous. She's about, her face rank, is what they call it, is about 430,000. It just burbles around there. She's never managed to get anywhere near being anything but what they call an extra.
Right.
And of course, an extra is somebody who is not in the story. The camera never lingers on them very long. They're just in the background, walking around, taking up space. And that's the way she feels. I'm like, nobody knows her name. And to make this even worse, her her big brother, whose name is Hiro, is extremely famous and has just cracked the top 1,000.
Oh, wow.
So she is totally bumming.
She should be happy for her brother.
Oh, man.
Because they'll be like second level fame. The long tail of fame will kick in. Sort of like, what was it, you have a famous brother and then you get to do like bit parts.
Like the Baldwins.
Yeah, like the Baldwins. It eventually comes down to Stephen.
Right.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, and
Doesn't
but of course,
seem to be working for the Culkins.
No.
Yeah, and one more thing about the way the system works is, you remember the interface rings, those of you who've read Uglies. Those rings are sort of always listening to what everyone's saying. Then the city interface is always, and anytime you, hum a tune someone wrote, talk about them, look at their website, everyone has their own feed channel, sort of their own TV channel.
Right.
Every time you watch them, not think about them, but talk about them, or wear clothes they designed, copy the clothes that they wore, do the fad that they started. Anytime you do that, you make them a little more famous.
Right.
So in this city, everyone's always out there trying to get up fame, because fame is money.
Right.
Like that determines how where you live and what parties you get to go to.
And there's one place where if you're really famous, your house literally grows the more famous you are.
Wow.
Like it expands.
Yeah, one of
And
the
my
mansions.
favourite ones are the guys who are trying to game the system. There's a whole bunch of them, and they will just randomly chant somebody's name to bump them up. Because they all get together and just say it over and over again.
Right, they're called the Reputation Bombers, and they're a whole clique, and there's like 2,000 of them. So they just pick one of their members randomly and bump them up to fame, fleetingly and pointlessly.
Right.
By just sitting around and saying, John Scalzi, John Scalzi, John Scalzi, John Scalzi, John Scalzi. Would you pass me the John Scalzi?
I have no problem with this at all. I mean, thank God that we don't live in a world that has any sort of analog to this at all. Because frankly, I wouldn't want to live in that sort of world.
Oh, it just makes me shiver. It's almost like living in a world where beauty is everything.
No,
Yeah.
it's just,
And that would never happen
that
either.
would never happen. Beauty and fame going together some way, I just don't understand. Now you, Justine, you have just completed a trilogy, and you are about to start work on something new.
It's actually kind of pretty much finished, but my next book, which will be coming out with Bloomsbury next year, as you Americans say, in fall 2008. It's called The Ultimate Fairy Book, and it's set in a world where a lot of people have a personal fairy. So one of my characters has a clothes shopping fairy. So whenever she goes into a shop, whatever she tries on fits her perfectly and is drastically on sale. But my protagonist, who's 14, has a parking fairy. She's 14, she doesn't know how to drive, she hates cars. But every time she gets into a car, the person driving it finds the perfect parking spot.
Right.
And she was born with this fairy, so when her family figured it out, from then she's kind of been on rotation between aunts and uncles and her mother's best friend and so on, when they wanted to go into the city for like a dental appointment or go to a gallery. So she hates it, and she has decided this year she is getting rid of her parking fairy.
Right.
So she has this elaborate scheme. There are lots of theories about how you get rid of the fairy, but the one that you hear most often is that you don't do what it wants you to do. So she's not going in cars.
Right.
And because she's a bit of an extremist, she's also decided that she's not going to use any kind of transportation, just to not give it any chance at all. So she's actually stopped riding her skateboard, or cycling,
Or taking the bus, which might have to park someday.
Yeah. Right.
And that would ruin the whole thing, because she wants a
or
long...
going on a ferry. Or,
a long, uninterrupted stretch
The other
of no
kind of
parking.
ferry.
Yes,
Yeah.
any kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's right, I do pronounce them exactly the same. No, very, very. Do Americans make a difference?
No.
Well, no. Fairy.
Okay.
It sounds the
No,
same.
the ferry, the boat, and ferry,
magical creature. Completely different,
Okay.
usually. So.
So it's a searing social critique, as you can tell.
There you go.